And we are live. G'day everyone, Mike Jeffrey here, and you are listening to My Creative Journey, Season 2, Episode number 18. Today I am super excited to bring you a conversation with Jasmine Pollock, a young photographer who is just at the start of her inspiring journey, carving her path as a creative person. Jasmine actually came to one of my in-person photography workshops in Sydney earlier this year, and she told me the story about how she wanted to get into wedding photography. Since then, she has started building out her own wedding photography business and has already photographed several weddings, which is just awesome. Jasmine's story really is testament to the power of starting, even when it feels scary. And trust me, it's never going to feel like the right time to start anything, let alone starting a business. But when you're stuck overthinking it, someone else is out there just jumping in and figuring it out as they go. And those people will always get ahead. So you've got to throw yourself in and just try new things. Jasmine went from dreaming of a career in aeronautical engineering, of all things, to finding her passion behind the camera. And I can really relate to this story myself. And that's why I'm so excited to be able to bring it to you guys. She started with photography courses, setting up a home studio as well, and then navigating the transition from food photography, which she started in, to now capturing photos of people and weddings. In this episode, Jasmine opens up about the challenges of calling herself a photographer and the battles with self-doubt. And I think we all go through that when we're first starting as a creative, and then juggling the leap into full-time photography while still holding on to a part-time job. There's so much that comes up in this conversation. It's a very open and raw conversation, and I wanted to bring this to you guys as someone who is just starting out on their journey. The things that we're going through, I think a lot of us can relate to this story. So if you've ever wondered what it's like to take the leap into the unknown, to embrace the fear of just putting yourself out there, or to find joy in the craft, that you're going to love this chat. Jasmine's honesty, humor, and passion for creativity are so relatable. Honestly, super refreshing. One of the best conversations that I've had, I think. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jasmine Pollock. Hey Mike. Well, hello Jasmine, and thank you for coming on the podcast today. I wanted to start in a bit of an unusual place and ask a question of you to really see where we go with this episode, I guess. And I wanted to ask, how do you describe what it is that you do to people that you may like meet for the first time? Like, how do you describe your profession and what you do with your career to new people? Or what do you tell them?
Most of the time, if you just say I'm a photographer, people sort of get it straight off the bat. But then you have those people who are like, don't take it seriously, if you like. They just think, oh yeah, you're just clicking all the photos. But yeah.
It's interesting, I think, because for a lot of people, they're afraid to tell people they're a photographer or they're a creative person or someone who does something. And just like you said, like, there's that idea that they don't actually do a lot. For you as a photographer, when did you first start describing yourself as a photographer?
That is actually was a really big thing for me. Like, when am I allowed to start calling myself a photographer? I think there was like over a span of like maybe 3 months, I was just like, oh, can I now say, I'm a photographer? I don't know. So yeah, it was really weird because I was like, is it after I start getting paid for work? Is that when I'm a photographer? But then I did a lot of free work. So I was like, was I a photographer then or not now? But yeah, it's a bit of a blurry line.
I hear that from a lot of people being like, what classifies a photographer, or then what's a professional photographer? I think that's an even more gray area for a lot of people. Like, I could say I'm a photographer because I can take a good photo, but does that mean I'm a professional? I think you're a professional photographer if you've been paid to do photography, but I don't think there's anything else to that. I don't think you need to have any sort of awards, or no one else needs to give you some certification to tell you that you're an artist. Like, you are that person. If you've been paid, you're professional. If you're not paid, then you're still a photographer. And it's interesting to hear how, for you, you've been working at photography for quite a while. When did you start photography? Or when did you first pick up a camera?
I got my first camera. It was one of the, like the Instax Polaroid cameras. So that was my very, very first camera, and I got it on one of my birthdays, a good while ago now. That sort of started like the obsession for me. Like after I got that, within about 3 months, I'd gone and bought like 2 or 3 secondhand DSLR cameras, and just sort of photography just took over my whole life from that point. So I just, yeah, probably, yeah, probably that Polaroid camera.
It's interesting that you had it like a Polaroid camera was the first one for you.
Yeah. Well, they were pretty popular among like my friends, just to have little Polaroids to keep. So
I actually think a lot about this recently with like film photography seems to be coming back in. Everyone has a film camera. Every like birthday party you go to, every person's got a film camera in there. Like it might not be a very good one. Like it's a very sort of cheap film camera, but everyone seems to have one. This trend of it going around, I think it's quite a good thing because it exposes people to photography. I think a lot more people now are like open to the skill involved in photography and actually using a camera. It can only be a good thing to get more people involved in it. And for you, I'm sure that was like a starting point to then jump into, as you said, going and buying heaps of other cameras just to experiment with things.
yeah, it definitely was.
You started with a DSLR, you said. I feel like for a lot of people these days, I've spoken to people that haven't used a DSLR.
Really?
Yeah, like have just used like mirrorless cameras
Oh, that'd be
because
nice.
that's the new technology. How was that for you? Like, what was the learning curve like going into photography? You went into it obviously pretty late, I would say. How was the learning curve for you picking that up?
Well, not long after I went and bought those cameras, I was like in sort of a bit of a, I don't know, not sure what I'm going to do at that stage. So I started a TAFE course for photography. So it sort of, yeah, saved me a bit because after I started that course, I sort of learned how to use the camera in manual and all of those things. Whereas before, I knew next to nothing about the camera.
For everyone that's not in Australia, like a TAFE course, it's like higher education, I guess, like not quite a university degree. What was the catalyst for you going to TAFE? Like, what was the decision there involved?
I don't know. It was just sort of, it just came up as like an ad one day on my phone. It's like cert foreign photography. I was like, oh, that looks pretty good. And then I saw that it was one of the fee-free courses that was being offered. And I was like, I mean, there's nothing to lose, like what have I got? So I just did it.
I think education in art is such a interesting thing to explore because a lot of people have very polarized views on whether it's good or bad. What was your take on going through photography in an educational space, like in a sort of higher education classroom with other people?
I really liked it. I thought it was really good. There were some subjects where I thought, you know, I didn't really like it. I didn't think it was relevant to what I wanted to learn. But I mean, other people really enjoyed those topics. So, yeah. And when I started at the TAFE, we did like this whole section or like unit on studio photography. And that was actually what I got into first. So I was really, really big on studio and like product and food photography and things like that. So much so that I actually spent like quite a lot of money buying stuff for my own like little home studio, which I don't really use now because I've sort of flipped the switch on what I like. Um, but yeah, no, I really liked it. People seem to really enjoy it. I do think, yeah, it was nice being around so many other people that hadn't really used a camera before but wanted to. It was, yeah, good.
Yeah, I think a big part of starting as a creative, it can feel isolating to learn something. So I'm sure having people around you helped. And especially when they're going through it at the same speed as you are, like they're not ahead of you, they're not behind. Being able to sort of bounce ideas, I'm sure was helpful. But learning so many things to me is like, that's crazy. Like the fact that you got to learn so many different styles of photography in such a short period of time. you said you went into studio photography. What other kinds of things did you do in that course?
We did studio was probably the biggest thing. We did quite a lot of portraits, a lot of like headshots outside. We had an entire class on color. So like, yeah, color theory, like everything to do with that, just how to sort of balance the photos, I guess, with the composition and stuff. Um, yeah.
How did you find that those influenced your style or how you work as a photographer? Do you find that they're a big influence still, or have you tried to do a lot of work to create your own style outside of that?
I was thinking about this the other day. I think that classes like the lighting class, like teaching you sort of how to find those good spots, I still carry that with me all the time. Like I use the same things that were taught to me then. Um, Whereas things like the composition, they sort of really stuck to the rule of threes, which is really good. But I try and sort of mix it up every now and again to see if I can get something cool that's a little bit outside of the box, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I'm someone that loves to experiment with different things. And every time I think I know something, I'm like, how can I go against it just to see what it does? And if it doesn't work, that's fine. But I think you can get very stuck in a way of doing things, especially when you've only learned from one place. And I think that this is one of the big things that I have is like, I tell people all the time, don't just take advice from me. Go take it from a bunch of different people because different people have different ways of working. And just because I do something one way doesn't mean it's the right way to do something. How do you go about experimenting or trying new things for yourself?
I don't know. Most of it's like spontaneous. Like it's just like, oh, that'd be cool. Let's try that.
I think that's the whole artistic side, right? Like a lot of art that is provoking of thought is going outside of what we've been told to do. And whilst it may be good in a sort of corporate environment, if you're working with other big companies and doing headshots all day, yes, you got to stick to a plan and do them the exact same way all day because you can't get creative with that because you haven't got time. When you're doing art for yourself, I think that going outside of what's been taught is important because that's where you create the best art. And sometimes I have to remind myself of that. I'm like, look, who am I creating for? It's hard because working with clients, there's expectation, but there's also the expectation that you come with a style and you know what you're doing. So they're expecting something a little bit different. They're expecting theirs to have a little bit of quirkiness, a little bit of you in it. And how do you find that without experimenting? I think it was interesting what you said about doing studio work and having your own home studio, because one big way that I like to experiment is trying other styles of photography because I find that there's no sort of risk involved. There's no pressure, no expectation because I'm not sort of known for that style. So I can do whatever I want and no one expects me to have a way that I do things or stick to what I'm used to doing because I can just do whatever. How has that been for you trying a bunch of different things over the years?
Yeah, sort of the same, and like in my little studio, it's like I can sort of try whatever I want because no one else is watching me. I don't have to share these photos, it's like whatever I take, it's sort of mine to keep and I can do what I like with it. And if I like it, then sure, I can do something with it. But if I don't, it's okay because no one will ever know it happened.
That's exactly right. In your journey, what was next for you when you sort of ended the TAFE course? You said you did the home studio. Was that the next thing that you went into?
I thought it was going to be sort of where I was going to stay as well. So yeah, it was. I sort of just stuck myself into that. I had another Instagram page that I was like doing all food photography, like doing all that sort of stuff. And then I started getting just like little jobs on the side. So like lots of birthday parties and like corporate events and things like that. And the second I started working with people, as in like taking photos of people, I was just like, I don't think studio is for me at all. Like, I hate studio compared to this. Like, it's so much more fun. You can actually interact with what you're taking photos of instead of just a plate on a you know what I mean? It was so much better.
What was that first job that you did where you were like, this is so much fun?
It was a birthday party. It was the 60th birthday party, just in like this restaurant venue, and it was, so good. I mean, I still do like quite a few birthday parties and events here and there. And then I started, like, I got my first wedding ceremony, and then it sort of changed again. I was like, this is what I'm going to do, like, this is the thing. So I'm sort of waiting for the day where I find something else and I'm like going to change again. But I hope and I feel like engagements, couples, weddings, I feel like that's going to be hopefully where I stay.
I think that's the struggle for all creative people, is not knowing what they want to do and not sticking to something, because a big part of me says that if you stick to one thing for so long, you will make a career out of it and you'll be really good at it and you'll be successful in it. But I don't like just one thing. I like so many things. I've started, like, for example, this podcast, like, just because I wanted another outlet to do something else. Like, could I have gone harder at the things I already did? Probably. And would it have been more successful? Probably. But would I have enjoyed it as much? I'm not sure. For you, going into wedding photography and doing weddings, was that something that you ever foresaw for yourself?
No. Going into photography wasn't even something I saw for myself. No, I was like 100% set on going to uni and doing an engineering course. Like, that was what I was going to do. And then it sort of flipped on its head. And here I am. Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't. But I'm not mad about it. I'm really excited. I love it.
It's great to hear that you're so excited about it. I want to touch on engineering though. Where were you headed with that?
I was really wanted to do like aeronautical engineering, so like planes, because I studied engineering for my HSC and absolutely loved it. So that was where I wanted to head. Might still in the future, but obviously it's going to be long time in the future because I want to sort of pursue this first. I still get asked a lot, like, oh, Jazz, are you still going to go to uni? Like, are you still going to do that? And I'm like, well, it's still something that I'd love to do, but it's not where I see myself within the next few years. Like, I'm not mad that I'm going on a different little path. I'm okay with it. Yeah.
For you, what's the sort of goal? Do you have one of where you would like to take the photography business?
Yeah, at the moment I've still got like a part-time job on the side. So eventually I would like to not have that job and just to be doing photography. That's sort of probably the main goal, which I think is going to take me quite a while to get there. I'm sort of at the point now where it's like I sort of need to make the jump, if that makes sense, of do I stay with my job or do I go and try and pursue photography full time? Because, yeah, it's getting to the point where I'm having to turn away work because of my other job.
That's a hard position to be in. How does it feel when you turn away work?
I don't like it. I really don't like it because some of them are like really cool. There's been, a couple weddings as well. I was like, I just can't, because I know that something big at my job's coming up. So, yeah.
Is there a particular reason why you are reluctant to give up your other job?
I do love my other job. I won't lie. I do love my other job. I don't know. I think it's more just financially wise as well. Like, it'd be a really big thing to leave that security and to, just sort of put it all on myself to find that work to make the money. Yeah, it's a big thing.
Absolutely. I was like that when I first started. I sort of gave everything up and just went into photography, and I kind of felt the pressure of having to make an income from it straight away when I wasn't probably ready. And I went back and got a part-time job working in hospitality, I think for a few different reasons. First of which, I wanted some human interaction. I thought that would be nice. So always working by myself at home every single day wasn't all it was made out to be. But second, having some income, I think when you're working from a place of having to make ends meet every single day, like if you don't book the next inquiry that comes in, that could be the end of everything. That's a scary place to work from. So I definitely relate to not wanting to give something up that's stable in order to build something else. But it's hard when it's like everything that I say yes to now means that I say no to something else. So if another really big opportunity comes up, you've already booked yourself out for the next few months, what are you going to do? Or what do you think about when it comes to like booking in work? Are you just accepting everything, or are you trying to hold yourself and give yourself a bit of room to move?
I think at the moment it's sort of just accepting everything I can. Yeah, I could be doing more, especially, okay, for context, my other job is every weekend and all the weddings are on the weekend. So it's like, it's really, really annoying, to not have the weekends available. So yeah, it's been a struggle, and I'm still sort of trying to find the middle ground where I'm happy, like sort of taking on some jobs and then leaving space to be able to accept more later on down the line. I sort of haven't really found a good happy spot yet.
There's something to be said for understanding how much you can do. And there's a big thing of, even like what you said, is like, I'm not completely booked out. But what is completely booked out to you? What does that look like? And I think everyone should work out what that looks like for them, because it's different for every single person. Because for me, I only took on like 20 weddings a year. That was my max, because I didn't want to do more than that, because I couldn't give my everything to every client. And there became a point where I did a few too many way too close together, and I'd started to forget who the people were. Like I'd confused the two groups of people, and I was like, this is just not right. I can't do this. I'm overloading myself. Just because the person next door can do it, or just because I see someone online who works every Friday, Saturday and Sunday, does not mean that I have to do that. And their circumstances may be very different to me. So what do I need to live? Like, how much money do I need to make? But how much do I have to do to feel like I'm in this, like that I'm making ends meet? Like for you, have you calculated what you think you need, or how much you would like to be working?
I haven't calculated how much I'd need, like, on the money side. I've thought about how much I'd like to be working, and that a part of me wants to be like, just throw it all in, just like go straight in, just go as much as you can for as long as you can, and then you can relax. Whereas the other part's like, well, that's not very smart. You should stick to doing, I don't know, if it was weddings, say like one a week or once a fortnight, you know what I mean? So it's all spread out and there's time.
It's obviously hard because inquiries can be random, and you can get one, like, especially I know speaking in that profession, I get most of my work in autumn and spring. So just because I do 20 a year doesn't mean they're spread out every other weekend. It's mostly every weekend for 2 months, and then I'm off for 2 months. So yeah, it's not, obviously can vary. I would say though, for you, definitely do the math on how much you need to be working or how much you should be making, because I think that for a lot of people, it's an overlooked question that if you don't have the answer to that, you can't make a decision on whether you should leave a part-time job. There are so many people that I've spoken to who are doing really well with photography, still working another job, stressing themselves out, but don't feel like they can leave. But when they do the numbers, they're like, oh, well, I probably could, if I just got one more job here and there, I could make it work. And that would relieve so much stress and open you up. The quality of the work, I think, improves when we're able to breathe. When you're working from a place of stress and no time, the quality of work goes down. You probably then don't get as many inquiries in the future, so then it dries up quicker. So there's a whole trade-off of like, what's the right and wrong thing to do. And if you're enjoying your job, that's another aspect of like, I don't want to give up something that I love to go and do it. But everything, unfortunately, I think is a trade-off. How do you feel about pricing your work?
It definitely is not easy, and I think it stems down to how confident I feel about my work, if that makes sense. Like, even though if I look at it, what I've done, I'm like, yeah, that's really good. When I go to give that to someone else, I'm like, oh, is it really, like, will they like it? So yeah, it's hard because I obviously need to make money, but at the same time, I'm like, is it worth that, what I'm giving? Yeah. I did spend a lot of time at the start watching YouTube videos about it. Like, how do I price it? And they're like, you have to take into consideration experience and like all your equipment that you're paying for and your time being there. So I think probably those three things mainly. But yeah, it's still something that I'm unsure about. Yeah, still working on it.
I think for me, one of the biggest things was understanding the value that I'm giving to someone else. And so rather than pricing based on hours in my day, which varies, everyone thinks that their hour is worth a very different amount. So depending on what your previous job was, you'll have a preconceived idea of how much you're worth an hour. Like, a lot of people are escaping a job where they could be earning $25 to $30 an hour. If you're only pricing that as a photographer, you're going to be underselling yourself because you do a lot more hours that may not be included. You know what I mean? Like, there's editing and emails and admin and everything else that goes into that. But I think pricing based on value, how much are the images in our case as photographers, but the art generally, is that worth to the client? And what would they pay if, for example, you emailed them and said all the images are on the hard drive have been corrupted, or like my house just burnt down. How much would you pay to get those back? I think that's a good starting point. Even be like, what in this example, if I'm talking to someone, what is that worth? Because to you, that is the pressure that you hold, right? As the photographer, you hold that you hold that on your head that you are going to have all those images and you're going to deliver them after the fact, and you're there, especially on a wedding day, to document a special time in someone's life. What would it mean to them to get those images back, or to have really good images? Because obviously that comes into it as well, that you have confidence and skill in to be able to, and you believe in what you do. But how much is that worth to get those back? Even if you're talking about a birthday party or like family photos, what's that time in that person's life worth? Because that is what you're there to do, and your skill set allows that no one else could do that. That's how I think about it, because there are those people that would pay anything for those images. Of course, there's someone else who wouldn't pay much. And I get this question a lot. It's like, some people are underpricing me, like they're asking me to give them a discount or whatever because they just want the cheapest option. But then, do they want the cheapest option? Everyone always has a mark that they would go up to if, for example, the worst happened and their house burnt down. What would they pay to get all those images back? That is what they would pay. If they could pay it, they would pay it. They have the money, they just don't want to pay it. So it's a weird game, because you have to sort of play that for yourself. I think for you, like, when you're thinking about how to charge, what other things come into it apart from gear and time, experience? What else plays a role?
I mean, big part of my thinking is just, am I overcharging them? You know, like, are they willing to pay that? So half the time, it's not even what's my time worth. Am I going to get clients from this? Like, are they going to pay it?
It's hard, I think, when you need the clients, like what we were talking about before. When you need everyone to go through, you don't want to overcharge, because what if they do say no? But also in that same vein, like what we were saying before, everything you say yes to, you're saying no to someone else. So that's another way to think about it, is when you give up a Saturday in spring next year, well, when you like book that in now and you undercharge them, when another person comes to you early next year and says, hey, you're available on this day, you've then got to say no to them. So how much is it to turn them down? How much is it worth to turn them down?
You know what's funny is the exact same thing happened like not that long ago, and I was like, oh man, this really sucks. Yeah, exact same thing.
You kind of live in that place of, if you don't think there's going to be more inquiries coming in, you're scared to overcharge and have them turn you down. Whereas I think when you can get a consistent flow of people appreciating your work, coming through and understanding, you're like, well, if one person doesn't, there'll be someone else who will. And as you said, that probably will happen. Like I've definitely had people inquire, more than one person inquire for the same date. And I've had to tell other people no because I'm booked out. And I'm comfortable to tell them no because I charge correctly and I'm happy with who I'm working with. But if they came to me and I'd undercharged for another person because I didn't think I'd get anyone else on that day, and I've then got to tell these people who are happy to pay, full price, that no, I've already booked someone else at half price, so now I can't take you on. That's a hard sort of sell for yourself.
Yeah.
Is that something that you think holds you back in work? Is pricing, or do you feel confident in what you're charging?
I think it definitely holds me back. It's still something that I think about all the time. Like I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm not comfortable, but I'm unsure of whether what I'm doing is right.
I don't have any idea how much you charge, Jasmine, but I can tell you could probably charge more because I have seen your work. It's very good. You could definitely be charging more. Everyone could be charging more. I just think that's that empath in us that we don't want to charge too much, because I know for me when I was first starting that, let me give you an example. When I got married, for example, I couldn't really afford a photographer. I paid a lot less than I charge at the moment because I wouldn't have been able to afford myself. Let me just say that, because I was not in a position to afford someone. I was like 24 when I got engaged, or 23 when I got engaged. I couldn't afford anyone else. I didn't have a lot of income. So we had to go pretty cheap. And when I first started my photography business, I was like, I want to just serve people just like myself who couldn't afford a photographer, and I'm going to be that person for them. So I constantly undercharged myself for the first year. And at the end of that, I was starting to book work 18 months out at prices that I knew I was not happy with. And I was thinking about, in 18 months' time, I'm going to be even more unhappy with these prices that I'm working for this price still in 18 months' time, because the work is often so far in advance when you do give a quote or when you charge someone for something. And I had to make that decision of like, I'm going to cut out these people, yes, but I'm going to be happier in the process, and I'm going to stick at it a lot longer because I'm charging more. And so that was, for me, the sort of game changer of being like, well, I now am not burning myself out every time I work because I'm working for not much at all. Like, honestly, I was working for not much at all. And I think a friend came to me and said, why are you charging that? Like, you're doing so much more and so many more hours than anyone else out here. Why are you still charging this price? And I was like, well, I just feel bad.
Yeah, it does make you feel bad.
It does. But I think what I learned was when I charged more, the clients cared more. And that was a game changer for me, because it was like, wow, these people are investing more. They now care more, but they also trust me more as an artist, because they can see that I value myself because of what I'm charging.
Yeah.
Your price is as much a income tool as it is a marketing tool in terms of who you attract. So don't feel like when you start to charge more, you're leaving people behind, because there's always a market for that. There will always be someone who can work for half the price of you. There'll always be someone next door who will offer to do that who will offer just for free. And you'll probably see that when you go onto Facebook or in Facebook groups, or people are just always being like, I'll do it for free. That's fine. And there'll always be that person. So I don't feel bad anymore because I'm like, there will always be someone who's just starting and I'm handing that opportunity to them. But now I'm now working with people who genuinely really care about the outcome of the day and would pay anything to get those images because they know how valuable they are. I really want to sort of go away from that. Let's finish up talking about pricing because I think that's an interesting topic all in itself and I could make a whole episode about it, but we won't. Let's talk about creativity. For you, you said that you weren't, much of a creative person in school. You were doing engineering. I don't know. Is that a creative field? I myself came from a science and maths background. I wouldn't have said I was creative, but I don't know. Engineers are a bit more creative than me. Did you do anything in your childhood that you thought was creative? Did you have anything that you brought into your photography when you first started?
I think I was a pretty creative kid. I did used to do a lot of like drawing and like painting sort of things. So I don't really know if that's something you can bring into photography. I think maybe you probably could. I don't know how.
I think so. And I think that's why I use the words bringing in, because I think people are surprised where they can transfer skills from. I'm sure drawing has a big element of like composition, because when you draw something, you wouldn't draw it off the edge of the frame. You would make sure that it's in the middle of the frame. So like for a lot of people, they still struggle with that. Like I see a lot of photographers who have really weird composed images, and that's a skill that's learnt, but you can tell that they're new at it. Whereas for someone else that's been in art for a while, they know just what looks good and they have an eye for it. I don't think I had that eye for it when I first started, so I was like very technical the way I did things. For you, were you that type of person, or did you just have like a knack for photography when you first picked it up?
I don't know if I can say that about myself. I'm not sure. I think I did take a few photos where I was like, oh, that looks really good, and felt quite good about myself. But I think overall, I don't think I had the skills really that I needed. I think the TAFE course probably really helped me in that sense.
And then how about inspiration for you? Where do you draw inspiration for your photography, for your creativity? Is it in other photographers, or do you draw it from elsewhere?
I'd say mostly other photographers like yourself.
Stop
But no, the engagement shoot workshop with you, Josh, and Antonio, that was probably the best thing I've ever done for myself in terms of photography, because it just showed me how to do it, all the different ways, because you all do it differently, but they're all good ways, you know what I mean? So that was really, really good. And I still use some of the things that, was taught on that day, which is cool.
That's good. You use everything that I taught you, but hardly anything from the other two.
Yeah, definitely not anything from
don't
Josh
care about
and
Antonio and Josh. Yeah, they're weird guys. Don't ever listen to them. But I think we had a conversation about being an introvert as well, and working with clients. How do you find that working with other people? Because I know that everyone has a different style. And for me, when I was first starting, like hearing that there are different ways to do things is good. How do you go about working with clients and sort of juggling being an introvert?
I don't know. It's a bit of a fight with myself, because I really do love working with people. But I get really scared, and I find myself quite anxious before like every single time I go to like an event or to a wedding to take photos. I get really anxious about it. But once I'm in and once it's started, it's fine. So I think I just gotta like jump the gun and get in there, and then it's all good.
I have terrible imposter syndrome still to this day. And I often talk about it because I think it's important to sort of normalize that we're all a big judge of our own work. We all still don't think we're good enough, and I don't think we ever will. A lot of us still struggle to go out there and work, or to share our work or upload it anywhere. And I think that comes with time. You do definitely improve, but also the hurdles move, the sort of end goal moves, because where you think you need to be keeps moving as you progress. So as much as I can look back now and think, oh, I'm miles ahead of where I first started, I'm also not where I think I should be because that keeps moving. And I think it's the same with that. Being an introvert, I walk into a space and still don't think I'm sort of worthy to be there. Even though I always have that in the back of my head of being like, am I the right person for this job? You know what I mean? And I think that it's been something that I've looked at and worked on over the course of my career. It definitely was worse when I first started, being like, I didn't want anyone to come and approach me and ask me anything about anything to do with photography, because I was like, what if I get the answer wrong? What if I don't know this? Or what if someone's like, I was someone that used the eyepiece on my camera because I didn't want to use the back LCD screen, because I didn't want other people to stare over my shoulder and have a look at the images. So I'm like, if I hold it up to my eye, no one else can see the photos. And I would never show them. I knew they were good photos, and I'd go home and edit them and be very proud of them. But in the moment, I didn't want people to sort of question me or question what I was doing. I felt that pressure. And so that's been something that I've been unlearning. What is one of the sort of challenges for you when it comes about going out and working as a photographer?
So the day that I did with you, the wedding day, that was my first full day. And since then, I've done one or two more by myself. And it's just immense pressure, I feel. Just like, this is someone's biggest day of their life, pretty much. And I am meant to be, preserving that for them. And it's terrifying sometimes, because it's like, if I miss something or if I stuff up, that's entirely on my fault. And yeah, I think that it's just a lot of pressure, and sometimes I just think about it too much. I always remind myself that I've I've got I'm shooting onto two SD cards. I've got all the hard drives. It's fine. Nothing's probably going to happen if I'm alert on the date, watching. Everything will be okay. But there's always, as you said, always that voice in the back of your head that's just like, oh, but what if this happens? What if that happens? Yeah.
There will always be that fear that something could go wrong. As you said, I think having a good system of backing things up and having sort of redundancy is great. I always have two cameras. I have an extra one in my bag just in case something breaks. I have two of everything in case one breaks. And, because, as you said, it's a lot of pressure. And again, we could go back to why you should be charging more, because it's a lot of pressure, but I won't. But I think that being there for someone on that day, that is a lot of pressure. And there's a reason why not everyone can do this. There's a reason why a lot of people choose to walk away from this as a career. I think a lot of people have tried it. A lot of people said, after I get so many messages, people say, oh, I really respect what you do, because I've tried to do it once and I hated it. I couldn't deal with the pressure. And it is a bit that way. But I think once you get through it, a lot of really good can come from that. And we talked about creativity. How does your creativity thrive under that pressure?
I think sometimes my best work comes from under pressure, even though I may not feel it in the moment. When I look back on some of the photos that I've taken, I was like, that was probably the most stress I've ever been under. But God, like, the photos are great, like, I don't know. I find some of my best stuff is just spontaneous and not planned. And it just sort of happens when I'm, under all that pressure. It works.
I don't know about you, but I think if you stuck me in a studio for 3 hours and told me I could just go and create anything, I don't think I would do anything of any good because it would be just too open-ended.
Yeah. And that's exactly why that was one of the reasons why I stopped liking studio work, because I just ran out of things to experiment with. And then I was just like, there's nothing, when you work with people, everything's different every single time. Even though I've done heaps and heaps of birthday parties, every single birthday party, something different happened. I have to use, I don't know, different settings, different lighting, like nothing's the same.
Yeah. And it's just, I think creating from a place of constraint is so important. And I tell people this all the time. Just because you don't have all the gear, that's a good thing, because you get to learn what you have. And using the same thing every single time, like, yes, that may not be creative, but it opens up other things that will be creative. Like when I've gone in and done a few weddings back to back with the same gear, I'm now a bit over the gear. Like I want something new, and in the back of my head, something's trying to tell me that, like, go and change your lens or go and add another light or do something else to make it a bit more interesting. But then I have to push on it and say, no, my most creative work comes from those constraints, because I now, rather than changing the gear, I change how I take the photo, and something comes out of that. Or the way that I communicate with the client, I'm now no longer focused on the gear. I'm focused on the client interaction. And what comes through that is so much more important than any gear I could ever have.
Yeah.
Have you sort of picked up any tricks that you use when you're working with clients or working with people in general? Because I know that for a lot of people, doing photography is great, but it scares them to go out and work with people. I think that that's one thing that I hear a lot. Like a lot of wildlife photographers, landscape photographers, sport photographers even, are scared to jump into, say, portraiture or do engagements or couples, families, because working with people is hard. Have you picked up any tricks jumping into that have really helped you?
I think I've got to attribute that to my other job, really. My other job's doing like guided tours and things. So I think I really learnt through that how to sort of engage with people. And I think personally, even with photography, the best way is just to get them laughing for me. Is just to make it fun, because I hate having photos taken of myself. Absolutely hate it. That's why I chose to be behind the camera instead of in front of it. But if once you get past that awkward sort of first 5 minutes thing, it's turns out okay.
And how does someone who's a little bit introverted, go working with clients, but also doing sort of tours as well? Like that sounds like, I'm sure that helps probably in a way.
It definitely did help. So I had that job before I started photography as well. So same thing with the job. I'm still scared before every single tour. Still scared, even after years of doing it. It's still scary. I doubt it's ever going to change for me. I feel like I'm always going to get that bit of anxiety before it happens, but it's getting easier.
I always say that the day I stop being anxious or scared is the day I stop caring.
I mean, yeah, that's true.
And that's really the day I should stop, especially doing a wedding photography. If I'm not scared walking into that room or into that, I don't know, ceremony outside, wherever it may be, if I'm not scared walking in there, then there is something wrong, because I don't care. I don't care what the outcome of the day is. I should be scared a little bit, because it means that I care about the outcome and wanting to document it the best possible way. I'll always hold myself too high of a standard, but at the end of the day, I sort of fall somewhere that is really good because I've overcommitted myself. If I don't care, then who knows what could happen. I could destroy everything if I didn't care and not preserve it and walk in underprepared. That would be horrible. So yeah, I think that's a good feeling. And for a lot of people, if anyone feels that way, I don't think that they should be necessarily thinking that it's the wrong thing for them. I think that that's a big thing. People think it's wrong because I'm scared. It might actually be the right thing for you to do, and you've got to throw yourself in even more.
That actually gave me a lot of comfort, if that makes sense. Like, just knowing that, because it's right though. Like, you should be a little bit scared, because if you don't care about it, then you wouldn't be scared. So yeah, that's true. I'm gonna keep that. I'm gonna have that.
Is there anything that you would like to impart onto the audience today? Anything that you would like to tell your former self even about starting? Any sort of advice, any quotes that have helped you, anything that has really guided you that you would like to pass on?
The most important thing is quite literally just to start. I know that's sort of like a really cliche sort of thing, but even like I was saying before, like I get really, really scared before going to every single shoot, but you just have to do it. You have to do it, and then it 90% of the time turns out fine. So yeah, it just do it.
You know what's so funny is that on the episode 13, when I spoke to Julia Trotty, her answer was the same thing.
I was going to say, as I said it, I was like, I'm pretty sure I saw on one of the other podcasts that someone else said that.
But it's so true. Her answer was just press record. And then after that, just upload it. Because we can get so much in our own head. But as you said before, once you start, you get on that roll. And it's so hard just to walk out the front door some days to go to the photo shoot. You're in your own head in the car before you get out, and you don't want to go in there. But once you start, it's okay. And I think having a good practice of starting, because action often precedes motivation. If you start, you then get inspired to continue. You may not always be inspired to start. So getting yourself in a good practice of just going out, trying things, practicing, just starting. You don't know where that will take you. So I think that's great advice, Jasmine.
Woo.
Yeah, love that. Where can people sort of find more about you and your work and follow your journey and continue to be inspired by what you do?
I do have an Instagram account, Jasmine Pollock Media. I have a website as well, and the same thing, which I'm going to be putting onto my Instagram in my bio today because I just finished updating it. So that's good. That'll be on there. And yeah, I was thinking about starting TikTok, but I'm still not too sure. I'm a bit scared to do that still.
It's a strange place. I'll be honest with you. I think it's nice because you can it's outside of Instagram. Instagram's become very the same. Everyone sticks to the same sort of formula. But whereas I feel like on TikTok, you can do things a bit differently. And I think because you don't really have friends on there, I don't really ever see anything from any of my friends. So there's that less pressure again of like you just put whatever on there and see what works. So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's weird.
I feel like with TikTok, the weird things or like the out there things are the most popular. So, I mean,
I think so. So, yep, if you've got a weird personality, throw it on there. They're going to do well. I don't know for us. I'm scared to put myself out there too much on there. Well, I'll leave links to all your stuff down below, Jasmine, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I said in the planning, I said to you that I'd gotten a lot of requests from people asking to speak to someone who's not at like the height of their career. And I think it's inspiring to hear from you because I often forget what it's like starting, and a lot of us probably do as well. And I can interview people who've been in the business for 10 years and ask them about starting, and I'll often forget things about how it actually felt. But asking you, it genuinely felt real. And I'm glad that you gave those answers because I think that they will help a lot of people, and I'm sure that everyone will gain a lot from this episode. And go give Jasmine some love.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
No worries at all. Well, that is the end of today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation half as much as I enjoyed having it. If you did enjoy today's episode, I would really appreciate it if you did leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or a 5-star rating on Spotify. Or if you're watching over on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and leave us a comment down below to let us know that you did enjoy this episode. Also, feel free to share this episode on Instagram and tag me at Mike Jeffrey Photography so I can reshare them on my stories. And also message me and let me know who you would love to hear on an upcoming episode of this podcast. I've always tried my best to be able to have conversations with people who are in the creative space and people that I think would be a good fit on this podcast. And I would love your input as well. In a very privileged position at the moment where, I'm able to reach out to people and have them on my podcast and have really interesting conversations with a whole range of people in the creative space and talk about their creative journey. So if there is anyone you would love to hear from, please let me know and I will do my best to try to get them on the podcast. At this time, I would also like to acknowledge the first creatives of the land on which I am recording today, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of so-called Australia. As we tell stories of today, I just want to reflect on how First Nations people here and across the globe have guided and informed our understanding of the creative journey. But until next week, friends, have a lovely week, and I will speak to you all again next Monday. Bye. Editing and post-production on this episode was done by Mossy Heart Media, and music was created by J.W. Payton.